Imagine waking up every morning, you take a deep breath, and you realize the sky isn't really blue. It's just this persistent, hazy gray. For hundreds of millions of people, particularly in a vibrant, fast-growing country like India, that's not just imagination. It's the daily reality. And this reality, it isn't just about bad views. It's actually a silent, insidious killer. It contributes to so many health crises. We're talking, of course, about air pollution. And it turns out one of the major culprits, maybe one we don't think about enough, is right there, right on our roads, our own vehicles. Today, we're taking a deep dive into this choking reality of tailpipe pollution in India. We'll explore why current efforts to clean things up aren't quite hitting the mark, even with good intentions, and maybe look at what bold, sort of innovative new ideas could really make a difference. Our mission really is to unpack why India's current approach to vehicle emissions just desperately needs urgent reform. We want to reveal some surprising facts, the systemic issues that actually prevent cleaner air, and crucially, show you where the real opportunities for change lie. We're going to try and break down these complex issues into clear insights, sort of give you a shortcut to really understand the challenge, but also the path forward. Because this isn't just about stats, right? It's about the actual air we all breathe.
It absolutely is. And the scale of this problem, I mean, for people who don't live with it every single day, it's truly staggering. That hazy gray sky you mentioned, it's not just, an eyesore. It translates directly into really profound and often tragic health impacts across the population. When we started digging into the numbers, they were quite sobering.
Yeah, I think what often surprises people, and I include myself in this, is that we tend to point fingers, at big industries, or maybe stubble burning in agriculture. And look, those are definitely contributors, big ones. But the vehicle's right next to us, on the commute. They're such a huge part of this crisis. It feels so baked into daily life.
That's exactly it. And what's particularly revealing are the hard numbers. They really underscore this reality. If you look at urban areas, vehicular emissions contribute something like 20 to 30% of what's called PM 2.5. Now, PM 2.5, for anyone not familiar, it's this ultra-fine particulate matter, tiny particles, like 30 times smaller than a human hair. When you breathe them in, they can bypass your body's defenses, get deep into your lungs, even into your bloodstream, which makes them incredibly harmful. They contribute to respiratory illnesses, heart disease, even some cancers. And to put a human cost on it, studies showed that tailpipe emissions alone were linked to roughly 74,000 premature deaths in India back in 2015.
74,000 just from tailpipes.
It's from tailpipes. And the challenge, it's only getting bigger. India is already the 5th largest car manufacturer globally. And just a few years ago, back in 2019, vehicle registration was growing by 10% annually. 10%. That's a huge jump year on year. And it's not just the number of cars. The transport sector is also the fastest growing source of carbon emissions in the country right now. So as India continues to grow economically, as cities expand, the very thing enabling that growth, transportation, is also making the air worse and adding to climate change.
So what you're saying is this problem isn't some external thing we can just blame on factories far away. It's woven right into our lives, our need for mobility, even our economic progress. We're kind of driving deeper into the smog, aren't we? It's a really uncomfortable paradox. And it makes me wonder, okay, given this grim picture, what are we actually doing about it right now?
Well, let's unpack the current approach then. We're hearing about measures like the one starting in Delhi July 1st, 2025. They're planning a ban on older vehicles and restricting fuel for these so-called end-of-life vehicles. Now, on the surface, that sounds perfectly sensible, right? Get rid of the old clunkers, clean up the air. Seems direct.
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the nuances, they often trip us up. The intention behind these age-based bans, it's obviously noble. You want to get high-polluting vehicles off the road. But the approach itself is, well, it's fundamentally flawed. It's a bit like judging how efficient a complex machine is just by looking at its manufacturing date, not its actual performance.
Okay, so age isn't the whole story. Not even close. The reality is way more complex. Think about it. A well-maintained, maybe 15-year-old Maruti 800 could potentially emit less pollution than a much newer SUV that's been neglected. Or maybe it's running on dodgy fuel, or the owner drives it really aggressively. Emissions depend on so much more than just age. Maintenance is key. Fuel quality is huge, driving habits matter, even the specific engine tech.
Hmm.
And what's really worrying about just focusing on age is that it risks being incredibly unfair. Socially unfair. It disproportionately hits lower income owners. People who rely on these older but maybe perfectly functional vehicles for their livelihood. Think of an auto rickshaw driver. Their whole family income might depend on that 12-year-old vehicle. Or a small shop owner using an older van for deliveries. These policies could accidentally push loads of these vehicles into some kind of unregulated informal market, where they become even harder to track or monitor or control. So instead of solving it, you might just be hiding it. Or even making it worse in this sort of shadow economy.
That's a really crucial point. So the system isn't actually measuring what's coming out of the tailpipe, but just making this broad judgment based on the vehicle's birthday. How effective can it possibly be? It feels like aiming blindfolded. You might miss the real polluters altogether, which I guess raises the next big question. Even if the policy was perfect, what about enforcing it?
Precisely. And if we connect the dots here, it leads us straight to another major hurdle. The whole integrity and reliability of how we enforce this stuff. How are these emissions actually supposed to be checked on the ground? And the answer? Well, it reveals a pretty stark, almost unbelievable reality.
Right, because the policy on paper is one thing, but how it actually works day to day.
Yeah.
That's everything. How reliable are these checks?
Okay, so what's fascinating and frankly quite alarming is the data around the current emission testing setup. Get this. A staggering 95% of emission tests in India rely on manual checks.
95%. Annual.
Manual. Think about that. Only 12% of the total testing capacity is automated. And even of that small automated capacity, only 5% is actually utilized. So the vast, vast majority of our pollution control relies on a system that's just wide open to human error, inconsistencies, and yeah, unfortunately, corruption. We've all heard stories, seen reports. Testing centers where instead of an accurate test, you might just pay a fee for a pass certificate. They just turn a blind eye to cars clearly belching smoke. It's a fundamental crisis of data integrity.
Wow.
Yeah. Because when your main diagnostic tool, the emission test, is unreliable, then every policy decision you build on that shaky data is undermined. It makes your solutions misdirected, or worse, totally ineffective. It's like trying to navigate thick fog with a compass that spins randomly. You might be moving, but you're probably not going the right way, and you might hit something. Without accurate, trustworthy data on actual emissions, how can we possibly know who the worst offenders are, or track if our policies are even working?
That really throws a wrench in the works, doesn't it? It highlights this critical vulnerability. It's not just about flawed policy design. It's a foundational problem. If you can't trust the measurements, then everything built on top is just, well, it's built on quicksand. Okay, so another solution we hear about a lot is scrapping these end-of-life vehicles, getting them off the road permanently. Seems logical, right? Remove the polluters, maybe recycle parts, move towards cleaner options.
Yes, and logically it makes sense. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the scrapping process itself, while it's necessary, can actually become a new source of pollution if we don't manage it properly. India's current system for scrapping vehicles is, well, it's pretty underdeveloped.
How so?
There just aren't enough organized, environmentally sound facilities to handle the sheer number of vehicles that need to be retired responsibly. And even where facilities do exist, the process isn't always very eco-friendly. Often these vehicles aren't dismantled in a way that really prioritizes responsible recycling or reuse of components. Think about all the hazardous stuff in a car. Battery acid, engine oils, coolants, heavy metals like lead and mercury in different parts. If these aren't disposed of or recycled correctly, they just leach into the soil, into the groundwater. They contaminate the environment in a different but just as harmful way.
So we're just shifting the pollution problem.
Exactly. It's not just about getting rid of the problem vehicle, it's how we get rid of it. If we're just moving pollution from the air to our land and water, we haven't really solved anything, have we? We need a really robust system. One that doesn't just remove old vehicles, but makes sure every single part is either responsibly recycled, safely reused, or properly disposed of. Otherwise, we risk this secondary wave of environmental damage. It's like, cleaning your house by sweeping all the dirt into a corner. It looks tidy for a second, but the problem's still there, maybe even getting worse.
Right. So just getting old cars off the road isn't the full answer. It's the process of disposal that really matters to avoid more harm down the line. It's like a chain, and every link needs to be strong. Okay, so given all these challenges, the flawed age focus, the dodgy testing, the underdeveloped scrapping, it really begs the question, What can we actually do? What are the forward-thinking, effective solutions that could genuinely break this cycle and get us cleaner air?
That's the critical question, isn't it? Where do we go from here? We've actually identified several innovative approaches that, especially if used together, could dramatically improve things, shift us towards a system that actually works. First, imagine real-time emission monitoring. Instead of relying on these infrequent static tests at some center, what if you had sensors measuring emissions directly from the tailpipe while the car is actually driving?
Like a fitness tracker for pollution.
Exactly, like a fitness tracker for the car's pollution. This tech could give us live, continuous data, pinpoint exactly which cars are the worst offenders right now in real time. This allows for immediate, targeted intervention. It moves us away from guessing based on age towards knowing based on actual current performance.
Okay, that sounds powerful.
And second, think about automatic number plate recognition cameras, ANPR. We see them for speed traps, tolls, but they could be like traffic cops with X-ray vision for pollution. Imagine integrating ANPR systems with that real-time emissions data, or even just a database of vehicles that are compliant, that have passed legitimate tests. You could dynamically track vehicles, flag those that haven't passed, identify repeat polluters instantly. It makes enforcement much more dynamic, transparent, and way harder to cheat. Puts the onus back on the owner to stay compliant.
That's a potent combination. Constant, accurate monitoring, plus smart enforcement using tech. It really shifts away from the current system that seems so easy to game.
Absolutely. And then third, there's this idea of transferable scrapping credits, securely linked perhaps to Aadhaar. For listeners outside India, Aadhaar is the unique biometric ID system, very secure, very verifiable. So imagine an owner scraps their old polluting car properly at a certified facility. In return, they get a digital credit. This credit could then be used, say, towards buying a new, cleaner vehicle, or maybe even sold to someone else who needs a scrapping credit for their own vehicle retirement. It creates this powerful market-driven incentive. It rewards people for doing the right thing, retiring old vehicles responsibly. And the Aadhaar-linked adds security and transparency, cutting down fraud. It turns a chore into a potential benefit.
Interesting. So you're incentivizing the good behavior.
Precisely. And finally, there is what we call upstream compliance. This means holding the manufacturers accountable right from the start, at the point of production. If they don't make vehicles that meet tough emission standards, not just when new, but over time, or if there are known issues with a certain model's long-term emissions, they should be held responsible. This shifts a big chunk of the burden away from just individual owners and enforcement agencies onto the companies that actually have the most control over the vehicle's design and technology in the first place. It's not just about driver behavior. It's making sure the cars being sold are genuinely clean and stay clean.
Wow. Okay, so these aren't just pie-in-the-sky ideas. These feel like tangible, actionable steps. Real-time data, ANPR, smart incentives, manufacturer accountability. They could fundamentally redefine how we manage vehicle emissions, couldn't they? And potentially lead to much cleaner air. It moves us from being reactive and often ineffective to being proactive, data-driven, and maybe even incentive-based. But implementing all that in a country as huge and complex as India, that must have its own massive challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly not simple. The path forward isn't easy, but it is achievable. So what does this all mean for us, for you listening? How do we take all these insights, the stark problem, the flawed current methods, the promise of these new solutions, and actually move towards something truly impactful, something that makes a real difference to the air we breathe every day?
Yeah, how do we put it all together?
Well, to really cut down tailpipe pollution, it absolutely requires a multifaceted approach. There's no single silver bullet here. First, we have to shift our focus fundamentally, away from just a vehicle's age towards its actual emissions performance, period. And that means investing heavily in automated, real-time testing infrastructure. We need accurate, tamper-proof data. That data becomes the bedrock for everything else. Second, building that robust, genuinely responsible scrapping ecosystem is critical. Not just removing vehicles, but ensuring proper dismantling, recycling, safe disposal of all the hazardous bits, preventing that secondary pollution. And it needs to be scalable, ready for millions of vehicles. Third, we need to actively incentivize cleaner vehicles. Things like targeted subsidies, maybe tax breaks, other financial perks for people choosing EVs, hybrids, or just cars with the latest, cleanest engines. These nudges really can steer consumer choices.
Makes sense. Make the clean choice the easier or cheaper choice.
Exactly. Fourth, holding manufacturers accountable right from the factory gate for the emissions performance of their vehicles. That's non-negotiable. Rigorous testing, tough certification, maybe even looking at life cycle performance guarantees. Make sure the supply chain is clean by design, not just trying to fix problems later. And finally, importantly, we, the public, all of us, we have a significant role too. Through diligently maintaining our own vehicles, through choosing cleaner transport options whenever we can, walking, cycling, public transport, cleaner cars, and crucially, by supporting policies and initiatives that genuinely champion clean air. Voicing our support for these kinds of systemic changes, look, it's a tall order, it's a massive undertaking. It needs coordination across government, industry, citizens, but the air we breathe, the health of our communities, our kids' health, it absolutely depends on making these systemic shifts and these individual shifts too.
That really puts it into perspective. It's not just one group's job. It's this deeply interconnected collective effort. Okay, so we've peeled back the layers today on India's tailpipe pollution crisis. We've gone beyond the obvious, uncovered the systemic problems with things like age-based bans, the big flaws in manual testing, and this underdeveloped, sometimes polluting scrapping system. But we've also seen a path forward, haven't we? Shifting to real-time emissions data, using smart tech-driven enforcement, and building comprehensive accountability right from the factory floor to the individual driver. That could pave the way for dramatically cleaner air. I think this deep dive really shows us that solving a problem as huge and pervasive as air pollution means we have to look beyond the simple, easy fixes. We need to demand systemic, data-driven change. But it also requires individual responsibility and conscious choices from all of us. Now, here's a final thought to leave you with. Imagine a future, maybe not too far off, where the air quality app on your phone doesn't just give you the general AQI for your city. Imagine it could tell you the specific real-time emissions level of the car driving right next to you. Maybe a little color-coded indicator pops up, or a score. How might that level of transparency, that immediate feedback, fundamentally change our daily choices, our sense of accountability as vehicle owners? How might it even change how our cities are planned for mobility if we had that kind of granular data everywhere? What kind of completely new, maybe unexpected innovative solutions might emerge then, once every breath we take is potentially linked to such undeniable real-time information? Let's keep exploring these vital questions, because understanding the problem in all its detail, all its transparency, that's the first absolutely critical step toward finally getting a breath of genuinely fresh air.